The philosophical journey has left you with a deepened sense of both the vastness of what remains unknown and the authentic progress possible through sincere inquiry. The ancient questions continue to baffle, yet engaging them has somehow enriched your relationship to existence itself. The morning light continues to strengthen around you in the garden. The entire night has passed in philosophical exploration, yet rather than exhaustion, you feel a peaceful alertness, a rejuvenated capacity for wonder. As you prepare to carry these reflections into sleep or into waking life, whichever awaits you now, you sense that these ancient questions will continue to unfold within you, inviting ongoing exploration of the inexhaustible mysteries of consciousness, reality, and meaning that constitute the philosophical journey of being human. As you settle in, preparing for night's rest, imagine your consciousness slowly detaching from the day's immediate concerns. The unresolved emails, the brief but meaningful conversations, tomorrow's plans, all begin to recede like shadows at dusk. Tonight, you embark on a different kind of journey, not across physical terrain, but through the landscape of moral inquiry that has shaped human civilization since we first developed the capacity to question our actions and their consequences. You may wonder why moral dilemmas matter. The answer lies in something you've likely experienced. That moment when you stand at a crossroads, knowing that whichever path you choose will leave something of value behind. Perhaps you faced situations where every available option seemed simultaneously right and wrong, where your heart pulled in one direction while your mind reasoned toward another. In these moments, you encounter the essence of moral complexity, the recognition that ethical life isn't merely about distinguishing good from evil, but navigating between competing goods and lesser harms in an imperfect world. As you settle in, preparing for the night's rest, imagine that your consciousness is slowly detaching from the immediate concerns of the day. The emails that need responses, the conversations that left you wondering, the plans for tomorrow, all of these begin to fade like the last light of dusk giving way to evening stars. Tonight, you're embarking on a different kind of journey, not across physical terrain, but across the landscape of human thought that has shaped our understanding of existence for millennia. You might be wondering why philosophical questions from thousands of years ago still matter. The answer lies in something you've likely experienced. That moment when, perhaps while gazing at a star-filled sky or watching the rhythmic dance of ocean waves, you felt a question rise within you that seems both personal and universal. Why am I here? What does it mean to live well? How can I be certain of anything? These questions emerge from the same wellspring of wonder that has nourished human thought since we first developed the capacity for reflection. Tonight, we'll explore these ancient wonderings together, not as academic exercises, but as living inquiries that continue to shape how we understand ourselves and our place in the cosmos. I invite you to approach these questions not with the urgency of finding immediate answers, but with the gentle curiosity of someone exploring a vast and beautiful landscape. Some paths will feel familiar, others might challenge you in unexpected ways. All of them belong to our shared human heritage of seeking to understand what it means to exist. Imagine you're sitting in a quiet garden as evening approaches. The air is cool against your skin, carrying the subtle fragrance of jasmine and cypress. Somewhere nearby, water trickles melodically over stones. This garden has existed in various forms for thousands of years. It is the garden of philosophical contemplation where Socrates once walked with his students, where Hypatia of Alexandria gazed at the stars, where Ibn Rushd pored over ancient texts by lamplight, and where countless unnamed thinkers throughout history have paused to consider the mysteries of existence. You're not alone in this garden. Beside you sits a figure, neither young nor old, neither definitively male nor female, who embodies the spirit of philosophical inquiry itself. This is Sophia, whose name in Greek means wisdom. When you look directly at Sophia, you see a reflection of your own questioning mind, your own capacity for wonder. Sophia speaks, and the voice seems to emerge both from your companion and from within your own thoughts. The journey we're about to undertake, Sophia tells you, begins with perhaps the most fundamental philosophical question of all. What does it mean to know something? How can we be certain that what we perceive as reality isn't merely an illusion? This question has haunted philosophers from Plato to Descartes to the quantum physicists of today. As Sophia speaks, you feel yourself sinking deeper into a state of receptive awareness. The garden around you seems both more vivid and more dreamlike. The boundary between your conscious thoughts and the narrative unfolding before you becomes pleasantly blurred. You are both participant and observer in this journey, thinking these thoughts and being thought by them. Before we explore specific questions, Sophia continues, I want to invite you to notice something about the very act of wondering. When you ask a philosophical question, you create a space of possibility, a momentary suspension of certainty that allows new insights to emerge. Philosophy begins not with answers, but with this willingness to dwell in uncertainty, to hold contradictory ideas in mind simultaneously, to be comfortable with not knowing. You notice your breathing has naturally slowed. Each breath now feels like a gentle tide, carrying you deeper into contemplation. The twilight deepens around you in the garden, and stars begin to appear overhead, points of clarity in the vast unknown. Your body feels heavier, more connected to the earth beneath you, while your mind feels increasingly spacious, ready to receive the ancient questions that Sophia is about to share. The questions we'll explore tonight, Sophia says, have been asked in different forms across cultures and throughout time. They emerge whenever humans pause long enough to wonder about their existence. These are not merely academic puzzles. They are invitations to experience the world differently, to see beyond habitual patterns of thought. Some may challenge your most basic assumptions. Others may articulate questions you've carried within you without having words to express them. As you listen, you begin to feel a subtle shift in your perception. The garden around you seems to expand, becoming a metaphor for consciousness itself, a cultivated space where ideas can take root, grow, and sometimes transform into something entirely unexpected. You're aware of the weight of your body sinking deeper into comfort, while your mind remains gently alert, receptive to the wisdom that has sustained seekers throughout the ages. Are you ready? Sophia asks, though it's not really a question requiring an answer. It's an invitation to presence, to full engagement with the journey about to unfold. You feel yourself nodding almost imperceptibly, and with that small gesture of consent, you cross the threshold into the realm of philosophical inquiry that has captivated the greatest minds in human history and continues to resonate in the questions we ask today. The first stars now shine overhead with remarkable clarity, each one a point of wonder in the darkening sky. Your eyelids may feel heavy at times, and that's perfectly natural. This journey is designed to accompany you even as you drift between wakefulness and sleep, planting seeds of thought that will continue to unfold in your dreams and perhaps emerge in new forms when morning comes. Our first exploration, Sophia begins, concerns the nature of reality itself. How do you know that what you perceive is actually real? How can you be certain that your senses provide reliable information about the world? This question has haunted philosophers from ancient times to the present day, and it's where we'll begin our journey through the great philosophical puzzles that still baffle us today. The garden around you seems to shimmer slightly as you prepare to delve into the first great question, your mind now perfectly balanced between alertness and tranquility, ready to receive the wisdom of the ages as you continue this journey into the heart of philosophical wonder. The stars above the garden seem to shift, forming new patterns as Sophia begins to speak of the nature of reality. Imagine, Sophia says, that you have spent your entire life in a cave, chained in such a way that you can only look at the wall before you. Behind you burns a great fire, and between the fire and your back, various objects are carried back and forth, casting shadows on the wall you face. These shadows are all you have ever seen. They constitute your entire reality. As Sophia speaks, you find yourself transported into this very scenario. The garden fades, and you experience the cool dampness of the cave, the weight of chains, the flickering shadows that dance across the rough stone wall before you. These shadows have names in your mind: tree, mountain, bird, person, though you've never seen the actual objects they represent. This, Sophia continues, is Plato's famous allegory of the cave, one of the most enduring thought experiments in philosophical history. Now imagine that one day you are somehow freed from your chains and forced to turn around. The fire blinds you initially, causing pain in eyes accustomed only to shadows. Gradually, you begin to see the actual objects that have been casting shadows all your life. You realize that what you thought was reality was merely a poor imitation, a shadow play projection of true forms. You feel a disorienting shift in perception as you imagine this revelation. The shadows you've named and categorized your entire life, suddenly revealed as mere projections of objects you've never directly experienced. Everything you thought you knew called into question in an instant. But the journey doesn't end there, Sophia says. Imagine now that you are dragged from the cave into the outside world. The sun, so much brighter than the fire, causes even greater pain to your eyes. Slowly, gradually, you begin to see the world as it truly is. Trees, not shadows of trees. Mountains, not shadows of mountains. The sun itself, not merely its reflected light. You come to understand that your entire previous existence was lived in a world of illusions, mistaking shadows for substance. The philosophical weight of this scenario settles into your consciousness. You find yourself wondering about the shadows in your own life, the assumptions, beliefs, and perceptions you've never questioned. What if what you consider reality is merely a shadow play on the wall of your own cave? What lies beyond the boundaries of your current perception? This allegory, Sophia explains, as the cave scenario gradually dissolves and you find yourself back in the twilight garden, raises fundamental questions about the nature of knowledge and reality that have puzzled thinkers for over 2,000 years. How can we be certain that what we perceive corresponds to what truly exists? Are we, like Plato's cave dwellers, mistaking shadows for reality? The night air in the garden feels cooler now against your skin, a gentle reminder of your physical existence as your mind explores these abstract realms. The stars overhead seem both more distant and more intimate, points of light whose true nature remains largely beyond your direct experience, known primarily through the theories and models of others. Consider your own experience in this moment, Sophia suggests. You perceive this garden, my voice, the sensations in your body. But how do you know these perceptions accurately represent reality? Your brain receives electrochemical signals from your sensory organs and constructs an experience of reality. But that construction happens entirely within your mind. Could it be that what you experience as reality is itself a kind of shadow, a mental representation several steps removed from whatever might exist independently of your perception? This question creates a pleasant vertigo, a philosophical dizziness that somehow deepens your relaxation rather than disturbing it. There's something liberating about questioning the most basic assumptions about reality. It creates a spaciousness in consciousness, a loosening of rigid certainties. The ancient Greek philosopher Pyrrho took this line of questioning to its logical conclusion, Sophia continues. After traveling to India and encountering skeptical philosophers there, he returned to Greece, teaching that we should suspend judgment about the true nature of reality altogether. Since our senses are unreliable and our reasoning is fallible, Pyrrho suggested that the wise person acknowledges that certainty is impossible. This suspension of judgment, he claimed, leads to a state of mental tranquility called ataraxia, freedom from disturbance. You notice that, as you contemplate these ancient philosophical doubts, your own mind has indeed become more tranquil. There's a paradoxical comfort in acknowledging the limitations of human perception and understanding. It releases you from the need to have everything figured out, from the pressure to be certain about that which might be inherently uncertain. Nearly 2,000 years after Plato, Sophia says, the French philosopher René Descartes undertook a radical experiment in doubt. Sitting alone by his fire on winter evenings, he systematically questioned everything he thought he knew. Could he be certain that he wasn't dreaming? Could an all-powerful deceiver be manipulating his perceptions? In searching for some foundation of certainty that could withstand even these extreme doubts, Descartes arrived at his famous conclusion: I think, therefore I am. Even if everything else could be doubted, the very fact of his doubting proved his existence as a thinking being. As you ponder Descartes' insight, you become aware of your own thinking process, the way your consciousness moves between concepts, creates connections, raises questions. Whatever else might be illusion, this act of thinking seems irrefutably present. Yet even here, questions arise. What is this I that thinks? Is it truly as unified and continuous as it appears to be? In our own time, Sophia observes, this ancient question about the nature of reality has taken new forms. Some contemporary philosophers and scientists have proposed that we might be living in a computer simulation, a technologically advanced version of Plato's cave. Others draw on findings from quantum physics that suggest reality at its most fundamental level behaves in ways that defy our intuitive understanding of how the world works. The question of what constitutes reality remains as open and as puzzling as it was in Plato's day. The garden around you seems to shimmer slightly, as if acknowledging its own potentially illusory nature. Yet there's something undeniably present about your experience in this moment. The gentle weight of your body, the rhythm of your breath, the clarity of these philosophical ideas as they unfold in your consciousness. What's fascinating, Sophia says, leaning closer as if sharing a secret, is that these ancient questions about the nature of reality aren't merely abstract intellectual puzzles. They have practical implications for how we live. If we recognize that our perception of reality is filtered through layers of interpretation constructed by our minds based on limited information, doesn't that suggest a certain humility is in order? Might it not encourage us to hold our beliefs more lightly, to remain open to perspectives different from our own, to acknowledge that our understanding is always partial and evolving? You feel yourself nodding slightly, recognizing the wisdom in this approach. There's a gentleness that comes with philosophical humility, a willingness to say, I might be wrong, or there's more to understand here, that creates space for growth and connection rather than rigid certainty. As we continue our journey, Sophia says, keep this question of reality's nature in mind. It forms a foundation for many of the other philosophical puzzles we'll explore. For now, though, let's turn to a closely related question that has occupied philosophers throughout the ages: the nature of the self. Who or what are you really? Are you your body, your mind, your memories, your social roles? What makes you the same person today that you were 10 years ago, despite countless changes at the cellular, psychological, and social levels? The night breeze rustles the leaves overhead, a gentle soundtrack to this transition between philosophical territories. You find your curiosity awakening to this new question even as your body continues to settle into deeper relaxation. The garden around you seems to be responding to the shifting focus of your attention, subtly rearranging itself to create the perfect setting for exploring the mystery of personal identity. The question of the self, Sophia begins, takes us into territory that is simultaneously deeply personal and universally relevant. It touches on concerns that have echoed through philosophical discussions from ancient Buddhist explorations of no self to contemporary debates about consciousness and artificial intelligence. Who are you beneath your name, your history, your accumulated experiences? What, if anything, remains constant as everything else changes? As the stars continue their slow wheel overhead, you prepare to delve into this next great philosophical question, finding yourself drawn deeper into both the intellectual exploration and the physical relaxation that accompanies this unusual journey through the timeless puzzles of human existence. Close your eyes, Sophia suggests, though perhaps you've already done so, and imagine yourself standing on the banks of a river. This is no ordinary river. It is the river of your own existence, flowing from the past toward the future. Watch how it moves, constant yet ever-changing. No two moments of its flow are identical. The water that passes before you now will never return in precisely the same configuration. As you visualize this river, it becomes increasingly vivid in your mind's eye. You can see the play of light on its surface, feel the cool mist rising from where it tumbles over rocks, hear the constant murmur of its movement. This river has a peculiar quality. Within its waters, you can glimpse images from your own life, childhood memories, pivotal moments, ordinary days that somehow lodged themselves in your recollection. The ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus observed that one cannot step into the same river twice, Sophia continues, for fresh waters are ever flowing in. This insight becomes particularly intriguing when we apply it to the question of personal identity. If you are constantly changing, physically, mentally, emotionally, then in what sense are you the same person throughout your life? What creates continuity of identity amid perpetual change? This question settles into your awareness like a stone dropping into still water, creating ripples of consideration. You reflect on how different you are from your childhood self, different cells in your body, different beliefs, different relationships, different experiences, yet there remains a sense of continuity, a thread of you-ness that has persisted through all these transformations. Buddhist philosophy, Sophia explains, takes this insight about impermanence to its logical conclusion. The Buddha taught anatta, or no self, the notion that what we experience as a stable, continuous self is actually an illusion constructed moment by moment. According to this view, what we call self is really just a collection of constantly changing physical and mental processes with no unchanging essence or soul at the core. The garden around you seems to pulse gently with this insight, everything within it revealing its impermanent nature. The flowers that open this morning will close tonight. The leaves that appear so solid are actually in a constant state of transformation at the cellular level. Even the seemingly permanent stones contain atoms in constant motion. This Buddhist perspective, Sophia continues, challenges our intuitive sense of having a fixed, essential self. It suggests that suffering arises partly from our attachment to this illusion of permanence, from resisting the reality of constant change. When we grip tightly to a fixed idea of who we are, we create unnecessary suffering for ourselves. There can be profound freedom in recognizing the fluid, ever-changing nature of the self. You notice that as you contemplate this idea, there's a subtle loosening of something within you, perhaps the very grip on fixed identity that Sophia describes. There's something liberating about considering that you are not bound by a rigid definition of self, that you are free to flow and change like the river in your visualization. Western philosophy has approached this question of personal identity from different angles, Sophia says. John Locke, writing in the 17th century, proposed that personal identity is fundamentally about psychological continuity, particularly the continuity of memory. According to Locke, what makes you the same person over time is your ability to remember your past experiences and connect them in a coherent narrative. Your river visualization shifts, the water now carrying not just images, but connected stories, narratives that link your past to your present in meaningful ways. You recognize how crucial these stories are to your sense of who you are, how they create patterns of meaning from the raw material of experience. But this raises fascinating questions, Sophia notes. What happens to your identity when memories fade or change? We know that memory is not like a video recording. It's a reconstructive process influenced by subsequent experiences, suggestions, and current emotional states. Each time you recall an event, you're not accessing the original memory, but your most recent reconstruction of it. If identity is based on memory, and memory itself is fluid and changeable, what does this suggest about the stability of the self? You find yourself contemplating instances where your memories have shifted over time, childhood experiences that look different from your adult perspective, interactions whose meaning has transformed with greater understanding, even situations where you've discovered that what you remembered didn't actually happen as you recalled it. The plot thickens, Sophia says, with a gentle smile in her voice, when we consider thought experiments that philosophers have used to probe the boundaries of personal identity. One of the most famous is the Ship of Theseus, which goes something like this. Imagine an ancient ship that is preserved over centuries by gradually replacing its parts as they wear out. Eventually, every original plank, sail, and rope has been replaced. Is it still the same ship? Now imagine that someone has collected all the discarded original parts and reassembled them into a second ship. Which one, if either, is the real ship of Theseus? The river in your mind's eye transforms into a harbor where two identical ships float side by side, one maintained through gradual replacement, the other reconstructed from original materials. The question of which is authentic seems simultaneously important and impossible to resolve definitively. Applied to personal identity, Sophia continues, this becomes even more perplexing. Your body replaces most of its cells over time. Your beliefs, values, preferences, and relationships change. Your memories evolve. In what sense, then, are you the same person you were in childhood? What creates the continuity that allows you to recognize yourself as yourself despite these profound changes? As you ponder this, you become aware of a paradoxical experience. The very consciousness that's questioning the nature of the self seems to have a quality of continuity to it, a witnessing presence that has observed all the changes without itself changing in quite the same way. Yet, even this witnessing consciousness is not entirely stable. It too experiences interruptions during sleep, variations in clarity and focus, and subtle transformations over time. Contemporary philosophy of mind, Sophia observes, has introduced additional complexities to this question of personal identity. Some philosophers propose that consciousness itself, your subjective experience of being you, is the foundation of personal identity. Others suggest that identity is fundamentally social and relational, defined by your connections to other people and your place within communities. Still others argue that narrative is key, that you are, in essence, the story you tell about yourself and the story others tell about you. The garden around you seems to respond to these different perspectives, shifting subtly to emphasize first your individual consciousness, then your connections to others, represented by intertwining plants, then the narrative quality of experience, shown through patterns that seem to tell a story. Each shift reveals a different facet of the puzzle of personal identity. What makes these questions more than academic exercises, Sophia says, is that they touch on deeply personal concerns. When you worry about death, what exactly are you worried about losing? When you make sacrifices for your future self, what connection do you perceive between your present and future selves that makes such sacrifice meaningful? When you feel proud of past accomplishments or ashamed of past mistakes, what continuity allows you to identify with actions performed by someone who, in many ways, is different from who you are now? These questions create a gentle resonance within you, not demanding immediate answers, but inviting ongoing reflection. There's something both unsettling and liberating about recognizing the fluid, constructed nature of what you call self. It challenges basic assumptions, but also opens possibilities for growth and transformation. As we sit with these questions about the nature of the self, Sophia suggests, notice how they connect to our earlier exploration of reality. If our perception of reality is filtered and constructed, and if our sense of self is similarly constructed and fluid, perhaps both are more malleable than we typically assume. Perhaps there's a freedom in recognizing that neither reality as we perceive it, nor identity as we experience it, is as fixed or solid as it appears. The night has deepened around you in the garden. The stars overhead seem both more numerous and more vivid than before, their light traversing unimaginable distances to reach your consciousness. Your body feels increasingly heavy and comfortable, while your mind balances alertness with deepening tranquility. The philosophical journey is carrying you into states of awareness that are simultaneously more focused and more expansive than ordinary consciousness. Now, Sophia says, let's build on these explorations of reality and identity to consider another perennial philosophical question: the nature of consciousness itself. What is this awareness through which you experience everything? How does subjective experience, the feeling of what it's like to be you, arise from physical processes in the brain? This hard problem of consciousness, as contemporary philosophers call it, has roots in ancient questions about the relationship between mind and matter, soul and body. As the garden settles into deeper night around you, you find yourself curious about this next philosophical territory, the mystery of consciousness itself, the very awareness through which you're experiencing this journey of ideas. Your breath has found a slow, steady rhythm that supports both physical relaxation and mental receptivity as you prepare to explore one of the most profound puzzles in philosophical history. Imagine, Sophia begins, that you are sitting in a darkened theater. On the stage before you unfolds a continuous play of sensations, thoughts, emotions, and memories, the constantly changing contents of your consciousness. Now, ask yourself, who is watching this play? Is there a viewer separate from the viewing, or is consciousness itself somehow both the performance and the audience? As you contemplate this metaphor, the garden around you seems to transform subtly into something resembling an ancient Greek amphitheater, with stone seating curved around a circular stage. On this stage, various elements of your own consciousness appear and disappear. A childhood memory here, a concern about tomorrow there, the sensation of your breath, an emotion rising and falling like a wave. The mystery of consciousness, Sophia continues, has puzzled philosophers since ancient times. In the Western tradition, Plato and Aristotle differed significantly in their approach to this question. Plato suggested a dualistic view, that the mind or soul is distinct from the physical body and can exist independently of it. The true self, according to Plato, is the immortal soul temporarily housed in a mortal body. This soul has access to eternal truths that transcend physical existence. You feel a subtle shift in your perception as you consider this Platonic perspective. There's something intuitively appealing about the notion that your consciousness, your sense of being an aware subject, is more than just the product of physical processes, that it connects to something transcendent or eternal. Aristotle, on the other hand, Sophia explains, took a more integrated approach. Rather than seeing mind and body as separate substances, he viewed the soul as the form or organizing principle of the living body, inseparable from it, just as the shape of a statue is inseparable from the material that composes it. For Aristotle, consciousness was not something added to the body from outside, but emerged from the organized activity of a living being. The amphitheater around you shifts again, the sharp division between stage and seating blurring to suggest this more integrated perspective. Mind and body, consciousness and physical processes, appearing not as separate realms, but as different aspects of a unified reality. These ancient Greek approaches have echoed through philosophical history, Sophia observes. René Descartes, whom we mentioned earlier, revived a form of dualism in the 17th century with his famous distinction between res cogitans, thinking substance, and res extensa, extended or physical substance. For Descartes, the mind was essentially different from the body, a non-physical substance capable of thought and self-awareness, while the body operated according to mechanical principles like a complex machine. You notice how this Cartesian division resonates with common intuitions. The sense that your conscious experience seems fundamentally different from physical objects and processes. Your thoughts, feelings, and sensations have a subjective quality that physical descriptions can't seem to capture fully. There's something it feels like to be you that seems irreducible to objective facts about brain states or bodily processes. This intuition about the uniqueness of consciousness, Sophia continues, is what contemporary philosopher David Chalmers has called the hard problem of consciousness. The problem can be stated quite simply. How and why does physical processing in the brain give rise to subjective experience? How do neural firings, which can be observed and measured from the outside, produce the private, first-person experience of seeing red, feeling sad, or thinking about tomorrow? Why is there something it feels like to be you? As you ponder this question, you become more aware of the miraculous nature of your own consciousness in this moment. The fact that the garden, the stars, Sophia's voice, and these philosophical ideas are not just being processed by your brain, but experienced by you. There's a subjective quality to this experience that seems mysterious when you really consider it. Various philosophical traditions have approached this puzzle in different ways, Sophia says. Some materialists argue that consciousness is ultimately just the activity of the physical brain, and the apparent mystery results from our incomplete understanding of brain processes. Eventually, they suggest, neuroscience will explain consciousness completely in physical terms. The amphitheater in your mind's eye transforms briefly into a laboratory where researchers study brain activity, measuring electrical signals and chemical changes as subjects report conscious experiences. There's something impressive about this scientific approach, yet also a nagging sense that it might be missing something essential about the subjective nature of experience. Others maintain that consciousness involves something that cannot be reduced to physical processes alone, Sophia continues. These perspectives range from property dualism, the view that consciousness is a fundamental property of reality that emerges under certain physical conditions, to idealism, which suggests that consciousness or mind is actually the primary reality, with the physical world being in some sense a manifestation or creation of mind rather than the other way around. The scene shifts again, suggesting a reversal of the conventional perspective. Instead of consciousness emerging from a pre-existing physical world, the physical world arising within a field of consciousness that is somehow more fundamental. It's a disorienting but fascinating inversion of the usual way of thinking. Eastern philosophical traditions, Sophia notes, have often approached consciousness from yet another angle. In various forms of Buddhist philosophy, for instance, consciousness is not seen as a fixed entity or substance, but as a process, a continuous flow of awareness that can be observed and directly experienced through meditation. Through such careful attention to the nature of consciousness itself, these traditions suggest one can recognize that consciousness has no center or boundary, no stable self at its core. You find yourself drawn to this perspective based on direct exploration of consciousness rather than theoretical speculation about it. There's something appealing about the invitation to investigate the nature of awareness through your own experience, rather than trying to figure it out conceptually. What's particularly fascinating, Sophia observes, is that contemporary cognitive science and phenomenology, the philosophical study of experience from the first-person perspective, have begun to develop methods that bridge these different approaches. Researchers like Francisco Varela have developed neurophenomenology, an approach that combines careful first-person attention to the qualities of conscious experience with third-person measurement of brain activity. This integration of perspectives creates a sense of possibility, that perhaps the mystery of consciousness requires multiple approaches working in concert rather than any single method or theory. The amphitheater in your mind now shows researchers and contemplatives working together, each contributing different but complementary insights to the exploration of consciousness. One of the most intriguing thought experiments related to consciousness, Sophia continues, is the philosophical zombie or P-zombie. Imagine a being physically identical to you in every way. Same brain structure, same behavioral responses to stimuli, but with no subjective experience whatsoever. Nothing it feels like to be this zombie. The question is such a being logically possible? If yes, that suggests consciousness is something beyond the physical. If no, then consciousness must somehow be intrinsic to certain physical arrangements. You try to imagine such a being, your exact physical duplicate, but with nobody home experientially, and find it both conceptually possible and deeply counterintuitive. There seems to be something about organized physical systems like human beings that naturally gives rise to subjective experience, yet describing exactly what that is or how it happens remains elusive. Another thought experiment, Sophia suggests, was proposed by philosopher Frank Jackson. Imagine a brilliant neuroscientist named Mary who has spent her entire life in a black and white room, learning everything there is to know about the physical processes involved in color perception. She knows all the facts about wavelengths of light, how they stimulate the retina, how the brain processes this information, everything. Then one day, Mary leaves her room and sees a red rose for the first time. The question is, does Mary learn something new in that moment? Something that wasn't contained in her complete physical knowledge of color perception? As you contemplate this scenario, you can almost feel what it would be like to see red for the first time after knowing everything about it scientifically. There does seem to be something, the subjective quality of redness, that goes beyond physical descriptions, however detailed they might be. These thought experiments, Sophia explains, highlight what philosopher Thomas Nagel famously called the view from nowhere problem. Scientific explanation aims at objective description, removing the particular perspective of any individual observer. But consciousness is inherently perspectival. It always involves a particular point of view, a subjective, what it feels like quality. How can we reconcile these two approaches to understanding reality? The tension between objective explanation and subjective experience creates a pleasant kind of cognitive suspension in your mind, a holding of opposites that doesn't force premature resolution, but allows the mystery to remain open. There's something appropriate about approaching consciousness with this kind of receptive attention, rather than trying to force it into any single conceptual framework. As we continue to explore consciousness, Sophia says, notice how it relates to our earlier questions about reality and identity. Your conscious experience is how you access what you consider reality. Your sense of self is intimately tied to the continuity of your consciousness. These philosophical questions aren't separate puzzles, but interconnected aspects of the fundamental mystery of existence. The night has deepened further around you in the garden. The stars overhead seem to pulse gently with their ancient light. Your body feels increasingly heavy and comfortable, while your consciousness remains receptive to these philosophical explorations, perhaps even more so as physical relaxation deepens. The theater of your awareness continues its fascinating play of thoughts, sensations, and insights as you prepare to explore the next territory in this philosophical journey. Let us now, Sophia suggests, build on these explorations of reality, identity, and consciousness to consider a question that has profound practical implications for how we live: the nature of free will. Are your choices truly your own? What does it mean to act freely? How can we reconcile the experience of making choices with our growing scientific understanding of the determined or conditioned nature of brain processes? This question takes us into territory where philosophy, neuroscience, physics, and everyday human experience intersect in fascinating ways. As Sophia's voice guides you toward this new philosophical landscape, you feel your curiosity deepening even as your body sinks into greater relaxation. This paradoxical state, mental alertness coupled with physical tranquility, creates the perfect conditions for contemplating one of philosophy's most challenging and personally relevant questions: the nature of freedom itself. Imagine, Sophia begins, that you're standing at the entrance to an ancient labyrinth. Multiple paths stretch before you, each leading to different chambers, different experiences, different potential outcomes. As you contemplate which path to take, you experience the distinct sensation of choice, a feeling that the decision is yours to make, that you could go left or right, forward or back, according to your own free determination. The garden around you transforms into the entrance of just such a labyrinth. Stone walls rise on either side of multiple pathways, each beckoning with its own mysterious promise. You can almost feel the weight of decision-making, the particular quality of consciousness that accompanies the act of choosing. This experience of choice, Sophia continues, is central to our human self-understanding. We build our moral and legal systems on the assumption that people make free choices and can be held responsible for them. We organize our personal narratives around the decisions we've made, the paths taken and not taken. Our sense of dignity and agency seems intimately connected to the belief that, at least in some meaningful sense, we author our own actions. As Sophia speaks, you become more aware of how deeply this assumption of freedom permeates your understanding of yourself and others. The very concept of a person seems to involve the capacity for self-determined action, for choices that express values, priorities, and character rather than merely playing out predetermined patterns. And yet, Sophia observes, when we examine this experience of freedom more closely, philosophical puzzles emerge. If we accept that physical events have causes, and that our decisions and actions are connected to physical events in our brains, aren't those decisions and actions also caused by prior conditions? And if they're caused by prior conditions, whether physical, psychological, social, or some combination, in what sense can they be truly free? The labyrinth in your mind's eye shifts subtly, the walls now appearing more like flowing currents, chains of cause and effect that seem to constrain the apparent openness of choice. You begin to sense the philosophical tension between the subjective experience of freedom and the objective observation of causality. This tension, Sophia explains, has given rise to one of philosophy's most enduring debates. Determinism is the view that every event, including human decisions, is the inevitable result of prior causes operating according to fixed laws. If determinism is true, then your current choice was determined by prior causes, which were themselves determined by even earlier causes in a chain extending back to before your birth. The idea creates a momentary vertigo, a sense that your apparent freedom might be more like a river flowing inevitably from mountains to sea, its course determined by gravitational pull, the shape of the land, the volume of water, and countless other factors beyond its control. The ancient Stoic philosophers, Sophia notes, embraced a form of determinism. They believed that the cosmos operates according to a rational principle they called logos, with every event unfolding necessarily from what came before. For the Stoics, wisdom involved aligning one's will with this cosmic necessity rather than futilely resisting it. Their famous metaphor compared human life to a dog tied to a cart. The dog can either run willingly alongside the cart or be dragged behind it, but either way, the cart's path is fixed. You consider this Stoic perspective, the suggestion that freedom might consist not in determining what happens, but in willingly accepting and working with what must happen. There's a certain tranquility in this view, a release from the strain of imagining oneself as the ultimate origin of one's actions. At the other end of the spectrum, Sophia continues, some philosophers have advocated for libertarian free will, the view that at least some human choices are not completely determined by prior causes. According to this perspective, there is a genuine openness to the future, a capacity in conscious agents to initiate new causal chains rather than merely continuing existing ones. The labyrinth reappears in your imagination, the multiple pathways now genuinely open rather than illusory options in a predetermined sequence. This view resonates with the subjective experience of deliberation and choice, the sense that the future is not yet written, that your decisions matter precisely because they could truly be otherwise. Between these positions, Sophia explains, lies compatibilism, the view that determinism and meaningful freedom can coexist. Compatibilists redefine freedom not as freedom from causal determination, but as freedom from certain kinds of constraint or coercion. On this view, you act freely when you act according to your own desires and values, without external compulsion, even if those desires and values were themselves causally determined by your genetics, upbringing, and experiences. This middle position creates a subtle shift in your understanding. Perhaps freedom isn't about being uncaused, but about being caused in the right way, by factors that genuinely reflect who you are rather than forces alien to your nature and values. The debate takes fascinating turns, Sophia observes, when we consider findings from modern neuroscience. In some famous experiments by Benjamin Libet, researchers found that the brain activity associated with movement begins several hundred milliseconds before subjects become consciously aware of their decision to move. Some interpret this as evidence that conscious choice is an illusion, that the brain decides before the conscious self experiences making a decision. You contemplate the strange implications of this research, the possibility that your sense of choosing might be a kind of after-the-fact narrative constructed by consciousness rather than an accurate representation of how decisions actually happen. Yet there seems to be something missing in this interpretation, some aspect of human choice that extends beyond momentary decisions to act. Critics of these experiments, Sophia notes, point out that complex, meaningful choices involve extended deliberation over time, not just momentary impulses to act. They also suggest that even if initial neural activity precedes conscious awareness, consciousness might still play a crucial role in vetoing or approving the emerging impulse before it becomes action. The final choice to allow or inhibit an action may still involve conscious freedom, even if the impulse itself arises unconsciously. This more nuanced view creates a sense of possibility. That freedom might exist in a complex interplay between conscious and unconscious processes, immediate impulses and extended deliberation, biological constraints, and genuinely open possibilities. Quantum physics has added another layer to this debate, Sophia continues. Classical physics was thoroughly deterministic, suggesting that if one knew the position and momentum of every particle in the universe, one could in principle predict the entire future with perfect accuracy. Quantum physics, however, introduces fundamental indeterminacy at the subatomic level. Some philosophers have suggested that this indeterminacy might create room for free will, though others argue that quantum randomness alone wouldn't constitute the kind of freedom that matters to us. The labyrinth in your imagination now seems to exist in multiple, overlapping possibilities, like quantum states that haven't collapsed into a single, definite configuration. This image captures something of the mysterious relation between determination, chance, and choice that characterizes human freedom. What makes this philosophical question more than an abstract puzzle, Sophia observes, is its profound implications for how we understand ourselves and others. If hard determinism is true, if all our actions are merely the inevitable unfolding of prior causes, what happens to concepts like moral responsibility, desert, blame, and praise? Can we meaningfully hold people accountable for actions they couldn't have done otherwise? Should we think differently about punishment and reward? These implications create a gentle resonance within you, a recognition that this philosophical question touches on deeply practical concerns about justice, ethics, and how we relate to ourselves and others. There's something both unsettling and liberating about questioning conventional notions of freedom and responsibility, opening new perspectives on human action and interaction. Interestingly, Sophia notes, different philosophical traditions have approached these questions in different ways. Many Buddhist thinkers, for instance, would question the very dichotomy between determinism and free will. From their perspective, the fundamental issue isn't whether some unchanging self has freedom from causal conditions, but rather how to understand the conditioned yet non-predetermined nature of the entire process of experience and action. This perspective creates a subtle shift in your consideration, moving from whether some entity called you is free or determined to a more process-oriented understanding of how consciousness, values, intentions, conditions, and actions interrelate in an ongoing flow that is neither rigidly predetermined nor uncaused. However we understand freedom, Sophia suggests, there may be practical wisdom in approaching it from multiple angles. We might acknowledge the extent to which our choices are conditioned by factors beyond our control, our biology, upbringing, circumstances, and the limitations of our knowledge. At the same time, we might recognize the genuine capacity for reflection, deliberation, and self-direction that characterizes human consciousness at its best. This balanced approach creates a sense of both humility and possibility. Humility about the extent to which your choices emerge from a complex, causal web that extends far beyond your individual consciousness, and possibility in the recognition that consciousness itself can become part of that causal web, introducing new factors of reflection, values, and intentional direction into the ongoing flow of events. As we continue our philosophical journey, Sophia says, notice how this question of freedom connects to our earlier explorations. Our understanding of reality shapes how we conceive of causality and choice. Our notion of personal identity influences what we mean by your choice, as opposed to events merely happening through you. Our conception of consciousness affects how we understand the relationship between awareness and action. These philosophical questions form an interconnected web, each shedding light on the others. The night has deepened still further in the garden. The stars overhead now form a dense tapestry of light against the dark sky. Your body feels heavy and perfectly at ease, while your mind maintains a gentle alertness, following these philosophical threads with a kind of effortless attention that becomes increasingly dreamlike without losing clarity. Now, Sophia suggests, let's explore a question that builds naturally on our consideration of freedom: the nature of ethical value. How do we determine what is good or right? Are there objective moral truths that exist independently of human opinion and cultural convention? Or are ethical judgments fundamentally subjective or relative to particular cultures and historical periods? This question takes us into territory that has profound implications for how we understand our responsibilities to ourselves and others. As the labyrinth of freedom gradually dissolves in your imagination, a new landscape begins to form, one that invites exploration of the foundations of ethics and the nature of value itself. Your philosophical journey continues to deepen as you prepare to consider one of the most practically significant questions humans have wrestled with throughout history: the basis for determining how we ought to live. Imagine, Sophia begins, that you're walking through a vast and diverse garden. In one section grow the delicate blossoms of personal happiness and fulfillment. In another, the sturdy trees of justice and fairness spread their protective branches. Elsewhere, the vibrant flowers of compassion and care unfold their petals. Throughout this garden, plants both familiar and strange represent different values that might guide human life: autonomy and community, honesty and kindness, courage and prudence, tradition and innovation. As Sophia speaks, the philosophical landscape around you transforms into precisely such a garden of values. You find yourself walking along winding paths that connect different areas, each embodying a particular ethical quality or principle. The garden feels both personal and universal, reflecting values you yourself hold while extending far beyond your individual perspective. This garden, Sophia continues, represents the realm of ethics, the domain of questions about how we ought to live, what we should value, and how we should treat ourselves and others. As you explore this garden, a fundamental philosophical question arises: what is the source and nature of these values? Do they exist independently of human minds and cultures, like natural features of the landscape? Or are they more like cultivated plants, human creations that vary according to who tends the garden and how? This question creates a pleasant tension in your awareness, a recognition that ethical questions simultaneously feel deeply personal and seem to reach beyond mere personal preference or cultural convention. When you judge something to be wrong or right, the judgment carries a weight that appears to transcend subjective opinion, yet different individuals and cultures often make conflicting ethical judgments with similar conviction. This tension, Sophia explains, has given rise to various philosophical positions. Moral realism is the view that at least some ethical judgments state objective facts about what is genuinely good or right, independently of what any individual or culture believes. Just as grass is green states an objective fact about the world, moral realists suggest that statements like torture is wrong or compassion is good might also state objective ethical facts. As you consider this perspective, certain areas of the garden around you seem to take on a more solid, permanent quality, as if their value exists independently of whether anyone recognizes or appreciates it. There's something intuitively appealing about the idea that some actions or states of affairs are genuinely, objectively better than others, not merely preferred by particular individuals or cultures. Plato, Sophia observes, was perhaps the most influential advocate for a strong form of moral realism. In his theory of forms, he proposed that concepts like justice, goodness, and beauty exist as perfect, eternal realities beyond the physical world. What we experience in everyday life are merely imperfect reflections or instantiations of these ideal forms. For Plato, ethical knowledge involves recognizing these transcendent moral realities rather than merely adopting conventional opinions about right and wrong. This Platonic perspective creates a sense of ethical aspiration in your awareness, a recognition that our moral intuitions might be reaching toward something real and perfect that exists beyond our limited understanding, like someone who has glimpsed a distant mountain peak through momentary breaks in fog. At the other end of the spectrum, Sophia continues, moral subjectivism suggests that ethical judgments merely express personal attitudes or emotions rather than stating objective facts. On this view, saying torture is wrong is more like saying I disapprove of torture or torture boo than like stating an objective fact about torture itself. Ethical disagreements, from this perspective, are not disputes about facts, but clashes between different subjective reactions. As this perspective takes shape in your mind, certain areas of the garden become more fluid and personal, their value seemingly dependent on the subjective response of the observer rather than any inherent quality they possess. There's a certain freedom in this view, a release from the need to discover some elusive, objective, moral truth that everyone should recognize. Between these positions, Sophia explains, lies moral relativism, the view that ethical judgments are true or false only relative to particular cultural frameworks or ethical systems, not absolutely or universally. On this view, an action might be genuinely right within one cultural or theoretical framework and genuinely wrong within another, with no objective standpoint from which to judge between these frameworks. The garden around you now organizes itself into distinct cultural regions, each with its own internal harmony and coherence, but operating according to somewhat different principles of cultivation and arrangement. You can appreciate the internal logic and beauty of each region while recognizing the challenge of determining which, if any, represents the correct approach to gardening. These philosophical positions, Sophia notes, connect to deeply practical questions about how we should approach ethical disagreements. If moral realism is true, then when cultures or individuals disagree about ethical questions, at least one party is objectively mistaken. This suggests that critical ethical dialogue, aiming at discovering moral truth, is both possible and necessary. If moral subjectivism or relativism is true, then such disagreements might be more like differences in taste, not resolvable by appeal to objective facts, but perhaps manageable through negotiation and mutual accommodation. You consider how different these approaches would be in practice. The moral realist engaged in a search for ethical truth that anyone should be able to recognize given sufficient reflection and dialogue. The subjectivist or relativist, more focused on finding workable compromises between different ethical reactions or cultural frameworks, without claiming that any single perspective has exclusive access to moral truth. Various moral theories, Sophia continues, have attempted to provide foundations for ethical judgment beyond mere opinion or convention. Utilitarianism, developed by philosophers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, proposes that actions are right to the extent that they promote the greatest happiness or well-being for the greatest number of beings capable of experiencing happiness or suffering. This approach offers an apparently objective criterion for ethical judgment based on the actual consequences of actions for experienced well-being. A section of the garden now illuminates to represent this utilitarian perspective, a carefully designed space where everything is arranged to maximize the total flourishing of all the plants together, sometimes sacrificing the perfect conditions for any single specimen to create the best overall outcome for the garden as a whole. Deontological theories, Sophia explains, offer a different approach. Immanuel Kant, for instance, argued that the moral worth of an action depends not on its consequences, but on the principle or maxim behind it. An action is right, according to Kant, if it expresses respect for the dignity and rational nature of persons, treating them always as ends in themselves, never merely as means to your own ends. This provides an objective foundation for ethics based on the requirements of reason and respect, rather than on consequences or subjective preferences. Another section of the garden takes form to represent this Kantian perspective, an arrangement where each plant is given its own space and conditions for growth, never sacrificed merely to enhance another, with careful attention to maintaining principles of order and respect throughout the garden. Virtue ethics, Sophia continues, offers yet another approach. Developing from the work of Aristotle, virtue ethics focuses not primarily on judging individual actions, but on cultivating the character traits or virtues that enable a person to live well. On this view, the fundamental ethical question is not, what rules should I follow? Or, what consequences should I seek? But, what kind of person should I become? A third section of the garden illustrates this virtue ethics approach, a space where attention centers on cultivating the health and excellence of each plant according to its nature, developing its characteristic excellences through proper care and attention, with the harmony of the garden emerging from the flourishing of each element according to its kind. As you explore these different ethical perspectives, Sophia suggests, notice that each captures something important about our moral experience, while perhaps missing or downplaying other aspects. Consequentialist approaches like utilitarianism acknowledge the crucial importance of how our actions affect the well-being of others, but may sometimes require actions that seem intuitively wrong or unjust if they produce the best overall outcome. Deontological approaches honor our intuition that some actions are simply wrong regardless of their consequences, but may sometimes seem rigid or insensitive to the complexities of particular situations. Virtue ethics connects ethics to human flourishing in compelling ways, but may provide less clear guidance for specific moral dilemmas. The garden around you now appears as an integrated whole, with elements of each approach contributing to its overall design. Attention to consequences, respect for principles, cultivation of excellences, all working together to create a space of ethical possibility that honors the complexity of moral experience. Beyond these theoretical approaches, Sophia observes, various philosophical traditions have emphasized the role of care, compassion, and relationship in ethics. Feminist ethics of care, for instance, suggests that traditional moral theories have often neglected the importance of caring relationships and emotional responsiveness in favor of abstract principles or impersonal calculations. From this perspective, being attentive and responsive to the particular needs of those with whom we are in relationship is as fundamental to ethics as following universal principles or maximizing overall welfare. The garden shifts again to highlight the interconnections between plants, the ways they support and shelter one another, adapt to each other's needs, form complex relationships of mutual benefit. This perspective emphasizes ethics as fundamentally relational rather than merely principled or consequential. Indigenous ethical traditions worldwide, Sophia adds, have often emphasized values of harmony, reciprocity, and responsibility toward the more than human world. These approaches extend ethical consideration beyond human beings to include obligations toward animals, plants, landscapes, and future generations. They suggest that living well involves maintaining appropriate, respectful relationships with all aspects of the world that sustains us. The garden expands once more to show not just cultivated plants, but their integration into a wider ecosystem, the soil microbes that support them, the insects that pollinate them, the birds that disperse their seeds, the weather patterns that provide water and sunlight. Ethics appears here as a matter of finding one's proper place within larger systems of relationship and interdependence. What makes these ethical questions more than academic exercises, Sophia suggests, is that they touch on how we understand our most basic obligations and aspirations. What do we owe to others near and far, present and future? What constitutes a well-lived human life? How should we balance self-interest with concern for others? How do we prioritize among competing values and obligations when they come into conflict? The philosophical positions we take on the nature and foundations of ethics shape how we approach these deeply practical questions. You find yourself nodding slightly in agreement, recognizing how these abstract philosophical considerations connect directly to everyday choices and to the largest questions about how human beings should live together on this planet. As we continue our philosophical journey, Sophia says, notice how this exploration of ethics connects to our earlier questions. Our understanding of reality influences what kinds of moral facts we think might exist. Our conception of personal identity shapes what we consider to be in someone's interest or good. Our perspective on freedom affects how we understand moral responsibility and desert. These philosophical threads continue to weave together into an integrated fabric of understanding. The night in the garden has reached its deepest point. The stars overhead have shifted position as the hours have passed, tracking the Earth's rotation through space. Your body feels perfectly at ease, supported completely, while your mind balances gentle alertness with deepening tranquility. The philosophical journey continues to unfold with a dreamlike quality that nonetheless maintains conceptual clarity. Now, Sophia suggests, let's explore a question that connects naturally to our consideration of ethics and values, the nature of meaning and purpose in human life. What makes a life meaningful? Is there a purpose to existence that we might discover, or do we create meaning through our own choices and commitments? This question takes us into territory where philosophy touches on our deepest aspirations and concerns as conscious beings seeking to understand our place in the cosmos. As the garden of values gradually dissolves in your imagination, a new landscape begins to take shape, one that invites exploration of meaning, purpose, and the ultimate questions of human existence. Your philosophical journey deepens further as you prepare to consider perhaps the most personally significant question humans have wrestled with throughout history. What makes life worth living? Imagine, Sophia begins, that you are standing at the base of a vast mountain. This is no ordinary mountain, but one that represents the human quest for meaning and purpose. Various paths wind their way up its slopes, some well-traveled, others nearly hidden. Some paths are ancient, worn smooth by countless feet over millennia. Others are newly blazed. All lead upward, but toward different vantage points, different perspectives on what might constitute a meaningful human life. As Sophia speaks, the philosophical landscape around you transforms into this mountain of meaning. You can see the multiple pathways stretching upward, some straight and direct, others winding and circuitous. Some paths appear to converge at certain points, others remain distinct throughout their ascent. The mountain itself seems both imposing and inviting, a challenge that calls forth your deepest resources, but promises profound rewards. This mountain, Sophia continues, represents one of philosophy's most personal questions. What makes a human life meaningful or worthwhile? Is there a purpose to existence that we might discover? Or do we create meaning through our own choices and commitments? These questions have occupied philosophers, religious thinkers, artists, and ordinary people throughout human history. As you contemplate these questions, you become aware of their weight and significance. Unlike more abstract philosophical puzzles, these questions of meaning and purpose touch directly on how you understand your own life, the choices you make, the aspirations you hold, and how you face both joy and suffering. Various philosophical traditions, Sophia explains, have offered different perspectives on these questions. Religious frameworks typically suggest that meaning comes from aligning one's life with a divinely established purpose. On these views, the universe itself has been created with intention, and human lives find their true meaning by recognizing and fulfilling their proper role within this larger design. As you consider this perspective, one path up the mountain becomes particularly visible, a route that suggests meaning comes from above, from beyond the human realm, to be discovered rather than invented. There's something appealing about this approach, the suggestion that existence itself has an inherent purpose that might provide direction and significance to individual lives. Existentialist philosophers, Sophia continues, offer a dramatically different perspective. Thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir suggested that life has no predetermined meaning or purpose. Existence precedes essence. As Sartre famously put it, we first exist, and then create our essence or meaning through our choices and actions. On this view, meaning isn't discovered, but created through the authentic exercise of freedom and responsibility. Another path up the mountain emerges more clearly as Sophia describes this approach, a route suggesting that meaning arises from below, from human choices and commitments rather than from cosmic design. This perspective carries its own distinctive appeal: the freedom to define your own purpose rather than having it dictated from beyond, coupled with the responsibility to create a meaningful life through your own authentic choices. Between these positions, Sophia observes, lie various perspectives that combine elements of both. Some philosophers suggest that while there may be no predetermined cosmic purpose for human existence, certain activities or relationships might nonetheless provide objective meaning. Aristotle, for instance, argued that human flourishing, or eudaimonia, comes from developing and exercising our distinctive human capacities, particularly our capacity for reason and virtue in a complete life. This approach suggests that meaning emerges from living in accordance with human nature, neither arbitrarily created nor imposed from beyond. A third path up the mountain takes shape as Sophia describes this middle ground, a route suggesting that meaning arises from the actualization of potential that is inherent in human nature, a purpose that is neither entirely discovered nor entirely created, but rather fulfilled through living well. What's particularly interesting, Sophia notes, is how these various approaches might evaluate different potential sources of meaning. Consider creative work, for instance. The religious perspective might value creativity as participation in the divine creative activity. The existentialist might see creative expression as an authentic exercise of freedom that creates meaning where none existed before. The Aristotelian might understand creativity as the fulfillment of distinctively human capacities for imagination and production. As Sophia speaks, you begin to notice that despite their different starting points, these diverse paths sometimes converge at particular overlooks or resting places on the mountain, suggesting that different philosophical frameworks sometimes recognize similar activities or relationships as meaningful, even if they understand that meaning in different ways. Or consider loving relationships, Sophia continues. The religious perspective might understand love as participation in divine love, as fulfilling a divinely established human need for connection. The existentialist might see loving commitment as a freely chosen project that creates meaning through authentic engagement with another person. The Aristotelian might understand loving friendship as essential to human flourishing, as fulfilling our nature as social beings. Again, you notice convergence among the paths, different theoretical approaches arriving at similar recognitions of love's significance for a meaningful life, even as they understand that significance differently. Contemporary philosopher Susan Wolf, Sophia explains, has suggested an appealing hybrid view. She proposes that a meaningful life involves active engagement in projects of worth, that is, both subjective engagement, finding the activity fulfilling, caring about it, and objective worth, the activity actually being valuable in some sense beyond merely being chosen. On this view, meaning requires both that we care about what we're doing and that what we're doing is genuinely worthwhile. This perspective creates a subtle shift in your understanding, suggesting that meaning involves a kind of resonance or harmony between subjective commitment and objective value, neither reducible to purely personal creation nor to mere conformity with external standards. Another contemporary approach, Sophia continues, comes from Japanese philosopher Kitaro Nishida, who developed the concept of basho, or place. For Nishida, meaning emerges not primarily from either cosmic design or individual choice, but from finding one's proper place within a network of relationships and activities. This place isn't fixed or predetermined, but emerges through engaged activity in specific contexts, the way a musician finds their place within an ensemble through the act of playing together, simultaneously shaping and being shaped by the whole. This perspective offers yet another path up the mountain, suggesting that meaning arises neither from above nor from within the isolated individual, but from dynamic participation in contexts of relationship and shared activity that simultaneously form the self and are formed by it. What makes these philosophical questions about meaning more than abstract speculation, Sophia observes, is that they connect directly to experiences of meaning and meaninglessness in actual lives. Most people have experienced both, times when life seems rich with significance and purpose, and times when existence feels empty, pointless, or absurd. Philosophy offers conceptual tools for understanding these experiences and potentially responding to them in ways that enhance rather than diminish life. You reflect on your own experiences of meaning and meaninglessness, recognizing how each has shaped your understanding and choices, how each has revealed something about what matters most to you personally. The philosopher Albert Camus, Sophia continues, addressed the experience of absurdity or meaninglessness directly. In The Myth of Sisyphus, he considered the Greek figure condemned to push a boulder up a mountain for eternity, only to have it roll back down each time. Camus saw this as a metaphor for the human condition. We build things that will eventually crumble, seek knowledge that will always remain incomplete, create relationships that must end. Yet rather than despairing at this, Camus suggested something remarkable. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Even in the absence of cosmic purpose or ultimate success, the very act of engagement itself can provide a kind of meaning. This perspective creates yet another path up the mountain, suggesting that meaning might be found not in achieving some final purpose or state of perfection, but in the quality of engagement with life itself, whatever its ultimate cosmic significance or lack thereof might be. Viktor Frankl, Sophia adds, offers another perspective shaped by extreme experience. As a Holocaust survivor who lost most of his family, Frankl observed in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, that even in the most horrific circumstances, those who could find or maintain some sense of meaning, whether through love, work, or dignity in suffering, were more likely to survive psychologically and sometimes physically. For Frankl, meaning could be found in three ways: through creating or accomplishing something, through experiencing something or encountering someone, particularly in love, and through the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering. This approach illuminates yet another path, suggesting that meaning remains possible even in the most challenging circumstances, not as a denial of suffering, but as a way of relating to it that maintains human dignity and purpose. What many of these diverse perspectives share, Sophia observes, is recognition that meaning typically involves connection to something beyond the self, whether to other people, to values or ideals, to work or creative activity, to nature, to the divine, or to a cause greater than oneself. The meaningful life, on most philosophical accounts, is neither completely self-contained nor completely self-transcending, but exists in that fertile territory where self-fulfillment and connection to what lies beyond the self somehow enhance rather than diminish each other. The mountain of meaning now appears in its full complexity, multiple paths ascending from different starting points, sometimes converging, sometimes diverging, all oriented toward heights that offer expanded perspective and deeper connection. The very multiplicity of paths suggests that meaning might not be a single, uniform quality, but might take different forms in different lives, while still providing genuine purpose and significance. As we continue our philosophical journey, Sophia says, notice how this exploration of meaning connects to our earlier questions. Our understanding of reality shapes what kinds of purpose we think might exist or be created. Our conception of the self influences what activities we see as fulfilling or worthwhile. Our perspective on freedom affects how we understand the creation of meaning through choice. Our ethical values guide which purposes we consider worthy of pursuit. These philosophical threads continue to interweave, each question shedding light on the others. The night around you in the garden has begun to show the first subtle signs of approaching dawn, not yet visible but tangible in a quality of the darkness that suggests it isn't permanent, that light will eventually return. The stars overhead remain brilliant, though perhaps with a slightly different quality now. Your body feels perfectly at ease, deeply relaxed, yet still receptive to the philosophical journey unfolding within and around you. Now, Sophia suggests, let's explore a question that connects naturally to our consideration of meaning and purpose, the nature of knowledge itself. How do we know what we claim to know? What distinguishes genuine knowledge from mere opinion or belief? What are the sources and limits of human understanding? This question takes us into territory that has profound implications for how we approach truth claims in every domain of life, from everyday judgments to scientific theories to philosophical assertions themselves. As the mountain of meaning gradually dissolves in your imagination, a new landscape begins to take shape, one that invites exploration of the foundations of knowledge and the scope of human understanding. Your philosophical journey deepens further as you prepare to consider one of the most fundamental questions humans have wrestled with throughout history: how we can know, and how we can know that we know. Imagine, Sophia begins, that you are standing before an ancient tower, its stone walls weathered by centuries of sun, wind, and rain. This is the Tower of Knowledge, a structure built and rebuilt countless times throughout human history, its architecture reflecting different understandings of what it means to know something, different approaches to separating truth from falsehood, wisdom from mere information. As Sophia speaks, the philosophical landscape transforms into this tower of knowledge. You can see how its foundation stones bear the marks of ancient hands, the earliest human attempts to understand patterns in nature, to pass on accumulated wisdom, to distinguish reliable insight from superstition and mere opinion. Higher sections show the influence of different traditions and approaches, some portions built with the precise measured stones of mathematical reasoning, others with the careful observational records of empirical science, still others with the intuitive insights of contemplative traditions. This tower, Sophia continues, represents humanity's ongoing quest to know, to understand ourselves and the world we inhabit. But the very possibility of knowledge raises profound philosophical questions. What does it mean to truly know something rather than merely believing it? What are the sources of genuine knowledge? What are its limits? How can we distinguish between knowledge and the mere appearance of knowledge? As you contemplate these questions, you become aware of both their theoretical significance and their practical importance. Every day you make decisions based on what you think you know, from trivial choices to life-altering commitments. What confidence can you have that these decisions rest on genuine knowledge rather than unexamined belief, wishful thinking, or mere probability? One of philosophy's oldest branches, Sophia explains, is epistemology, the study of knowledge itself. The term comes from the Greek episteme, knowledge, and logos, study. Since ancient times, philosophers have debated the fundamental question: what distinguishes knowledge from mere opinion or belief, even when that belief happens to be true? As you ponder this distinction, you consider how it's possible to believe something that happens to be true without really knowing it. Like someone who correctly guesses the outcome of a sporting event without having watched it, or who holds a true belief based on faulty reasoning or unreliable sources. Plato, Sophia notes, suggested in his dialogue Theaetetus that knowledge is justified true belief. That is, to know something requires 1. Believing it, 2. The belief being true, and 3. Having proper justification or good reasons for the belief. This analysis became the standard starting point for epistemological discussions for over 2,000 years. Though later philosophers have identified scenarios where all three conditions might be met, yet something still seems missing for genuine knowledge. The lower levels of the tower now illuminate to reveal this classical understanding. Knowledge represented as a structure requiring all three elements: belief, truth, and justification. You can see how removing anyone would cause this section to collapse, yet also begin to wonder whether these three elements, even together, are sufficient for genuine knowledge in all cases. An equally ancient epistemological question, Sophia continues, concerns the sources of knowledge. Rationalists like Plato, Descartes, and Leibniz emphasized the role of reason and innate ideas, suggesting that certain kinds of knowledge, like mathematical and logical truths, can be attained through pure reasoning, independently of sensory experience. The rationalist approach is captured in Plato's metaphor of recollection, the idea that learning is not acquiring something entirely new, but recognizing truths that, in some sense, the soul already knows. A section of the tower illuminates to represent this rationalist approach, areas built through deductive reasoning, with each element necessarily following from what came before through logical connection, creating structures of remarkable stability and coherence. Empiricists like Aristotle, Locke, and Hume, Sophia explains, emphasized instead the crucial role of sensory experience in knowledge. On this view, we begin as blank slates and acquire knowledge primarily through observation and experience of the world. While rationalism has particular strength in explaining mathematical and logical knowledge, empiricism seems better suited to explaining our knowledge of the physical world and contingent facts about reality. Another section of the tower now comes into focus, areas built through careful observation and experience, with elements arranged according to patterns observed in the world, rather than deduced through pure reasoning alone. These sections show greater variety and detail, but perhaps less perfect regularity than the rationalist structures. Kant, Sophia notes, attempted to synthesize these approaches in his Critique of Pure Reason. He suggested that knowledge results from the interaction between sensory experience and the innate structures of the mind that organize that experience. In his famous phrase, "Thoughts without content are empty. Intuitions without concepts are blind." For Kant, we cannot know things as they are in themselves, independent of our cognitive structures, but only as they appear to us when processed through these structures. A higher level of the tower illuminates to show this Kantian synthesis, areas where the materials of experience are arranged according to patterns inherent in the knowing mind itself, creating knowledge that is neither purely empirical nor purely rational, but a product of their interaction. Beyond these questions about the definition and sources of knowledge, Sophia continues, philosophers have long debated its scope and limits. How much can we know, and how certain can that knowledge be? Skeptics throughout history have raised powerful doubts about the possibility of certain knowledge, challenging us to examine critically what we think we know and how we know it. As Sophia speaks, you notice areas of the tower that appear unfinished or under renovation, places where what once seemed solid knowledge has been questioned, revised, or even abandoned in light of new evidence or arguments. The ancient Greek skeptic Pyrrho, Sophia explains, who traveled to India with Alexander the Great and encountered philosophical skepticism there, advocated suspending judgment about all beliefs, since neither the senses nor reason could provide indubitable knowledge. This complete suspension of judgment, he suggested, leads to a state of mental tranquility, or ataraxia, freedom from the disturbance that comes from holding beliefs that can be challenged or overturned. You consider this radical skeptical position, the suggestion that peace of mind comes not from finding certain knowledge, but from releasing the very desire for such certainty, accepting that all human understanding remains provisional and subject to revision. Less radical forms of skepticism, Sophia continues, acknowledge the possibility of knowledge while recognizing its limitations. Descartes employed methodical doubt not to remain in uncertainty, but to find a foundation of absolute certainty on which to rebuild knowledge. His famous cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, was intended as just such a foundation, a truth that withstands even the most extreme skeptical doubts. You notice how even this seemingly indubitable starting point raises further questions. What exactly is this I that thinks? What can we legitimately infer from this initial certainty? How do we move from knowledge of our own existence to knowledge of anything beyond it? Contemporary epistemology, Sophia observes, continues to wrestle with these ancient questions while addressing new challenges. Some philosophers have questioned the traditional emphasis on certainty, suggesting that knowledge might be better understood as reliable belief formed through dependable cognitive processes. Others have explored how knowledge is social and contextual rather than merely individual, how what counts as knowledge depends partly on community standards and practices, not just on the relationship between an individual knower and the world. The tower in your imagination continues to grow and develop, incorporating these new approaches. Some areas suggesting knowledge as a social achievement rather than merely an individual attainment, others emphasizing the processes through which beliefs are formed rather than focusing only on their justification at a particular moment. Feminist epistemology, Sophia adds, has raised important questions about how social position and power influence what questions get asked, what counts as evidence, what standards of justification are applied, and whose testimony is considered credible. These approaches suggest that understanding knowledge requires attending not just to abstract relationships between beliefs and truth, but to concrete relations of power and privilege that shape how knowledge is produced and evaluated. The tower shifts again to reveal how different perspectives and social positions might illuminate different aspects of reality. How certain areas of knowledge might be more readily visible from some locations than from others, suggesting the value of diverse standpoints for a more complete understanding. What makes these epistemological questions more than abstract puzzles, Sophia suggests, is their profound implications for how we approach truth claims in every domain of life. How do you evaluate what you read in the news or encounter on social media? What standards of evidence do you apply to scientific claims versus religious beliefs? When is personal testimony sufficient grounds for belief? And when do you require additional verification? Your implicit or explicit epistemology, your understanding of what constitutes knowledge and how to recognize it, shapes how you navigate a world overflowing with information and competing truth claims. You reflect on how these philosophical considerations connect to everyday decisions about what to believe and whom to trust. How your own approach to knowledge influences everything from minor practical judgments to your most fundamental commitments and values. Interestingly, Sophia observes, different domains of human inquiry may require different epistemological approaches. The kind of knowledge and certainty possible in mathematics differs from what's possible in empirical science, which differs again from what's possible in ethics, aesthetics, or interpersonal understanding. Perhaps wisdom involves recognizing these differences rather than applying a single standard of knowledge across all domains, knowing how to know differently in different contexts. This perspective creates a subtle shift in your understanding of the tower of knowledge, revealing it not as a single, uniform structure, but as a complex, diverse architecture, incorporating different materials and methods for different purposes, yet still forming a coherent whole that represents the full range of human understanding. As we continue our philosophical journey, Sophia says, notice how this exploration of knowledge connects to our earlier questions. Our understanding of reality shapes what we think can be known and how. Our conception of the self influences how we understand the knower and the knowing process. Our perspective on meaning affects what kinds of knowledge we consider most valuable or worth pursuing. These philosophical threads continue to interweave, each question illuminating the others. The pre-dawn quality of the darkness has deepened around you in the garden. There's still no visible light on the horizon, but the stars have shifted noticeably as the Earth continues its rotation through space. Your body remains in a state of deep relaxation, while your mind balances gentle alertness with increasing tranquility. The philosophical journey continues to unfold with a dreamlike quality that nonetheless maintains conceptual clarity and depth. Now, Sophia suggests, let's explore a question that connects naturally to our consideration of knowledge and understanding, the nature of time itself. What is time? Is it an objective feature of reality independent of our experience, or primarily a structure of human consciousness? How should we understand its apparent flow from future to present to past? This question takes us into territory where our everyday experience, scientific theory, and philosophical reflection intersect in fascinating ways. As the tower of knowledge gradually dissolves in your imagination, a new landscape begins to take shape, one that invites exploration of the enigmatic nature of time and our experience of temporal existence. Your philosophical journey deepens further as you prepare to consider one of the most mysterious yet intimate aspects of human experience, our existence within the flow of time, our awareness of past and future, our strange location in the ever-moving present moment. Imagine, Sophia begins, that you are sitting on the bank of a flowing river. This is no ordinary river, but the river of time itself. As you watch its waters move past you, notice how different aspects of the river appear. Upstream lies what we call the future, events that have not yet reached the point where you sit. Directly before you flows the present moment, the now that seems both incredibly brief and somehow the only thing that truly exists. Downstream stretches the past, events that have already flowed by your position, no longer directly accessible, yet somehow still part of the river's continuous existence. As Sophia speaks, this river of time materializes in your imagination with remarkable vividness. You can see its waters flowing in one direction with inexorable constancy. The riverbed provides structure to the flow, while the water itself is in constant motion. You notice how your position on the bank gives you a particular perspective on the river. You can see portions of what lies upstream and downstream, but your view is limited, and your direct contact is only with the water flowing past your present location. This river, Sophia continues, represents one of philosophy's most enigmatic puzzles, the nature of time itself. What exactly is time? Is it an objective feature of reality independent of our experience, or primarily a structure of human consciousness? Does time truly flow, with the future becoming present and then past? Or is this apparent flow an illusion created by our perspective? If time flows, what exactly is moving and relative to what? If time doesn't flow, how do we explain our universal experience of temporal passage? As you contemplate these questions, you become aware of how fundamentally time shapes human experience. Every aspect of existence seems temporal. Things change, processes unfold. Life itself is a journey from birth toward death. Yet when you try to grasp what time actually is, it seems strangely elusive, impossible to hold still for examination, impossible to step outside of for objective observation. Philosophical explorations of time, Sophia explains, often begin with the distinction between two perspectives, which the ancient Greeks called chronos and kairos. Chronos refers to time as sequential duration, the measurable objective succession of moments that clocks track and calendars record. Kairos refers to time as experienced significance, the subjective, qualitative dimension of time where moments expand or contract based on their meaning and impact rather than their chronological duration. As Sophia describes these perspectives, you notice how the river of time in your imagination demonstrates both qualities, its measurable flow representing chronos, while the varying clarity and significance of different sections corresponds to kairos, with some moments standing out as pivotal, while others blur together in extended sequences. Ancient philosophical approaches to time, Sophia continues, reveal a fascinating tension. Heraclitus emphasized time's flow and constant change, famously observing that no man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man. Parmenides, by contrast, argued that change and multiplicity are illusions, that reality is fundamentally unchanging, and time's apparent passage is not ultimately real. The river in your imagination momentarily demonstrates both perspectives, simultaneously appearing as constant flow with nothing fixed or permanent, and then as a single, unchanging whole when viewed from a perspective outside the temporal sequence itself. Plato inherited this tension, Sophia notes, and suggested a compromise. The eternal, unchanging realm of forms exists outside time, while the physical world exists within time as an imperfect reflection of that eternal reality. For Plato, time itself was created as a moving image of eternity, a sequential unfolding that imperfectly represents the simultaneous wholeness of true reality. This Platonic perspective creates a subtle shift in your understanding of the river, suggesting that what appears as Sequential flow from one vantage point might be perceived as simultaneous wholeness from another, more comprehensive perspective. Aristotle, Sophia continues, took a more empirical approach, defining time as the number of motion with respect to before and after. On this view, time is not a thing in itself, but a measure of change. Without change or motion, there would be no time. Yet Aristotle also recognized puzzles in this understanding. If time consists of moments, and a moment has no duration, how can a series of durationless instants create time's extended flow? And if the past no longer exists, and the future does not yet exist, what exactly is the ontological status of time itself? As you ponder these ancient puzzles, you notice how they still resonate with contemporary questions about time's nature. Despite centuries of philosophical and scientific investigation, the fundamental mystery of time, how it flows, what it consists of, how it relates to existence itself, remains largely intact. Augustine, Sophia observes, approached time from a more psychological perspective in his Confessions. He noted that when we measure time, what we're really measuring exists in the mind, the immediate past held in memory, the present given in attention, the immediate future anticipated in expectation. Perhaps it would be exact to say, Augustine wrote, there are 3 times: a present of things past, a present of things present, and a present of things future. On this view, time is fundamentally connected to consciousness and its modes of apprehending reality. This Augustinian perspective illuminates another dimension of the river of time in your imagination, highlighting how your consciousness somehow holds together past, present, and future in a unified experience that transcends the apparent point-by-point succession of isolated moments. Modern philosophy, Sophia continues, introduced new approaches to these ancient questions. Kant, like Augustine, connected time fundamentally to consciousness, but in a different way. For Kant, time is not a feature of things in themselves, but a form of inner intuition, one of the basic structures through which the mind organizes experience. We don't experience time because things are temporal. Rather, things appear temporal because we experience them through the mental framework of time. This Kantian perspective creates another shift in your understanding, suggesting that time might not be an objective feature of reality independent of consciousness, but rather a way consciousness structures its experience of reality, like a lens through which we inevitably view everything. Contemporary philosophy of time, Sophia explains, often distinguishes between 2 major theoretical approaches: the A theory or tensed theory of time, and the B theory or tenseless theory of time. The A theory aligns with our common sense experience of time as flowing, with events really changing their status from future to present to past. The present has a special ontological status on this view. It's where reality is happening, while the past is fixed and the future remains open. The river in your imagination now emphasizes this A theory perspective, the sense that the present moment where you sit really is ontologically special, the point where the future becomes actual and then recedes into the past, with reality itself unfolding through this process of becoming. The B theory, Sophia continues, suggests that all moments of time, past, present, and future, are equally real, and the appearance of flow or passage is ultimately illusory. On this view, time is more like a dimension of space, with different temporal locations simply existing at different coordinates rather than coming into and out of existence. The present has no special status except as the location where a particular consciousness happens to be situated. just as here has no special status except as the location where a particular body happens to be situated. This B theory perspective transforms the river in your imagination, suggesting that the entire river exists simultaneously as a complete entity, with your experience of temporal flow resulting merely from your position within it rather than from any objective passage or becoming in reality itself. Einstein's theory of relativity, Sophia adds, has often been seen as supporting something like the B theory, since it suggests there is no universal now. What counts as simultaneous depends on the observer's reference frame. This challenges the notion of an objective, present moment flowing through time, since different observers moving relative to each other will disagree about which events are occurring now. This relativistic perspective further complicates your understanding of the river of time, suggesting that different observers situated at different positions or moving at different velocities relative to each other would disagree about which points in the river are present, with no single perspective having absolute priority. What makes these philosophical questions about time more than abstract puzzles, Sophia suggests, is their intimate connection to human concerns and experiences. Our awareness of mortality, that our time is limited, shapes how we approach life and what we find meaningful. Our attitude toward past mistakes and future possibilities influences our psychological well-being. Our cultural and personal approaches to time, whether cyclical or linear, whether focused on preserving tradition or creating innovation, shape our values and choices in profound ways. You reflect on how these philosophical considerations connect to your own experience of time, how you relate to your past, how you anticipate your future, how you inhabit the present moment, how you understand your own temporal existence within the broader flow of cosmic and historical time. Particularly fascinating, Sophia observes, are philosophical explorations of how we might transcend time's ordinary constraints. Eastern contemplative traditions have long suggested that meditation can allow awareness to step outside the usual experience of temporal sequence into a more spacious present that encompasses what ordinarily appears as past, present, and future. Western mystical traditions similarly describe experiences of eternity, not as endless duration, but as a mode of existence outside sequential time altogether. This perspective opens yet another dimension of the river in your imagination, suggesting the possibility of a mode of awareness that relates to time differently, not bound by the usual experience of moment-by-moment succession, but somehow participating in a more comprehensive apprehension of temporal reality. As we continue our philosophical journey, Sophia says, notice how this exploration of time connects to our earlier questions. Our understanding of reality shapes how we conceive of time's fundamental nature. Our conception of identity influences how we understand persistence through time. Our perspective on knowledge affects how we approach the particular challenges of knowing the past and anticipating the future. These philosophical threads continue to interweave, each question illuminating the others. The quality of darkness around you in the garden has subtly shifted. There's still no visible sunrise, but a certain expectancy has entered the atmosphere, as if the air itself knows that night will not continue indefinitely. The stars remain visible overhead, though perhaps with slightly less brilliance than before. Your body maintains its state of deep relaxation, while your mind balances gentle alertness with increasing tranquility. The philosophical journey continues to unfold with a quality that seems to transcend ordinary temporal experience. simultaneously immediate and ancient, personal and universal. Now, Sophia suggests, let's explore a question that connects naturally to our consideration of time and existence: the nature of beauty and aesthetic experience. What makes something beautiful? Is beauty an objective feature of reality, or merely a subjective response of the observer? How does aesthetic experience relate to other forms of human understanding and value? This question takes us into territory where perception, emotion, judgment, and value intersect in fascinating ways. As the river of time gradually dissolves in your imagination, a new landscape begins to take shape, one that invites exploration of beauty, art, and the aesthetic dimension of human experience. Your philosophical journey deepens further as you prepare to consider a question that touches on how we perceive and value the world around us, how we create and appreciate art, and how beauty might relate to truth and goodness in the full spectrum of human values. Imagine, Sophia begins, that you have entered a remarkable garden designed to display beauty in its many forms. In one section bloom flowers of extraordinary color and form, their symmetry and proportion creating immediate sensory delight. In another area stands a classical statue, its marble form capturing the ideal human figure with mathematical precision. Elsewhere, a wild and seemingly chaotic arrangement of plants and stones evokes the sublime beauty of untamed nature. A musical composition plays softly in another corner, its harmonies unfolding in time rather than space. In yet another section, you encounter a poem written on a stone tablet, its beauty arising not from sensory qualities alone, but from the meanings and emotions it evokes. As Sophia speaks, this garden of beauty materializes around you with extraordinary vividness. You can perceive the different manifestations of beauty not just visually, but with all your senses: the fragrances of the flowers, the cool smoothness of the marble, the harmonious sounds of music, the rhythmic cadence of poetry. Each creates a distinctive aesthetic experience, yet all seem to participate in some common quality that we call beauty. This garden, Sophia continues, represents one of philosophy's most enduring questions: the nature of beauty and aesthetic experience. What exactly is beauty? Is it an objective property that exists in things themselves, independent of observers? Is it merely a subjective feeling or response in the perceiver? Or is it somehow both, a quality that emerges in the relationship between object and observer? These questions have fascinated philosophers since ancient times and remain just as compelling today. As you contemplate these questions, you become aware of how beauty permeates human experience, from our appreciation of natural landscapes to our creation of art, from our design of everyday objects to our cultivation of personal appearance. The experience of beauty seems universal across cultures, yet what is considered beautiful varies tremendously across times and places. Ancient Greek philosophy, Sophia explains, often connected beauty to objective properties like harmony, symmetry, proportion, and order. Pythagoras and his followers discovered that musical harmony corresponds to mathematical ratios, suggesting that beauty is not arbitrary but follows discoverable principles. Plato located true beauty in the eternal forms, with physical beauty serving as a pathway toward recognition of higher spiritual beauty. For Plato, aesthetic appreciation could begin with attraction to a beautiful body, but should progress toward appreciation of beautiful souls, beautiful ideas, and ultimately the form of beauty itself, pure, eternal, and perfect. As Sophia describes this platonic ladder of beauty, you notice how the garden around you seems to embody a similar progression, from immediate sensory appeal to more complex and abstract forms of beauty that engage not just perception, but understanding, not just body, but mind and spirit. Aristotle, Sophia continues, took a somewhat different approach, connecting beauty to the successful fulfillment of function or purpose. On this view, something is beautiful when it perfectly embodies the excellence proper to its kind. A beautiful tragedy for Aristotle is one that successfully accomplishes what tragedy should do, arousing pity and fear in a way that leads to emotional catharsis. This teleological approach suggests that beauty involves not just formal properties like proportion, but the relationship between form and purpose. This Aristotelian perspective illuminates another dimension of the garden, how each element seems not just visually appealing, but somehow right or fitting, embodying the particular kind of beauty appropriate to its nature and purpose. Medieval philosophers, Sophia notes, often connected beauty to divine creation and spiritual meaning. Thomas Aquinas identified three elements of beauty: integrity or perfection, the thing lacks nothing essential to its nature; harmony or proportion, its parts relate appropriately to each other and to the whole; and clarity or radiance, it shines forth, revealing its form clearly. For Aquinas and many other medieval thinkers, the beauty of created things ultimately points toward and participates in divine beauty. The garden around you seems to glow subtly as Sophia describes this transcendent dimension of beauty. Each beautiful thing somehow illuminated from within by its participation in a beauty that transcends it, as if material beauty were a window opening onto spiritual reality. Modern philosophy, Sophia explains, often shifted toward more subjective understandings of beauty. Kant distinguished between the pleasant, which merely gratifies the senses, the good, which satisfies reason, and the beautiful, which pleases through the free play of imagination and understanding. Beauty, for Kant, involves disinterested pleasure, appreciation that doesn't depend on practical utility or personal advantage. While our experience of beauty is subjective, Kant suggested it also involves a kind of universality. When we judge something beautiful, we implicitly claim that others should agree, even though we can't prove this through concepts. This Kantian perspective creates a subtle shift in your awareness of the garden, highlighting how your aesthetic response involves not just passive reception of sensory data, but active engagement of cognitive faculties. A play between perception and conception that creates a distinctive kind of pleasure different from mere sensory gratification or intellectual satisfaction. Contemporary discussions, Sophia continues, have further explored whether beauty is primarily objective or subjective. Some philosophers defend aesthetic realism, the view that beauty is a real property of objects, independent of observers. Others advocate aesthetic subjectivism, the view that beauty exists only in the response of observers, not in objects themselves. Still, others propose various, intermediate positions, that beauty involves a relationship between objective properties and subjective responses, or that it emerges through cultural practices and shared frameworks of appreciation rather than residing simply in either objects or individual experiences. The garden around you seems to demonstrate all these possibilities simultaneously, containing elements whose beauty seems undeniably intrinsic, others whose beauty seems more clearly dependent on particular perspectives or cultural frameworks, and still others whose beauty seems to emerge precisely in the relationship between objective qualities and subjective appreciation. Particularly interesting, Sophia observes, are philosophical explorations of the relationship between beauty and other values. Is beauty connected to truth? Some traditions suggest that beauty provides unique access to certain kinds of truth, that aesthetic experience can reveal aspects of reality not accessible through purely conceptual thought. Is beauty related to goodness? Various philosophical approaches have suggested connections between aesthetic and ethical values. That what is truly beautiful is also in some sense good. That aesthetic and moral appreciation involve similar capacities. That beauty itself might be morally transformative. These connections create new dimensions in your perception of the garden, suggestions that its beauty might not be merely decorative or pleasurable, but might somehow reveal truth about reality, might connect to ethical values, might even transform those who truly appreciate it. Intercultural perspectives, Sophia adds, enrich philosophical discussions of beauty by revealing both commonalities and differences in aesthetic appreciation across traditions. Japanese aesthetics, for instance, includes concepts like wabi, the beauty of simplicity, sabi, the beauty of aging and imperfection, and yugen, profound, mysterious beauty that cannot be directly expressed. Chinese philosophical traditions often emphasize how beauty emerges through resonance between the natural world and human emotional response. Indigenous aesthetic traditions worldwide frequently connect beauty to right relationship with the land and with more than human beings. The garden expands and diversifies as Sophia describes these varied approaches, revealing forms of beauty that might not be immediately recognizable through Western aesthetic frameworks, but that become apparent when approached through different cultural perspectives and conceptual resources. What makes these philosophical questions about beauty more than abstract puzzles, Sophia suggests, is their connection to how we perceive and value the world around us. Aesthetic experience is not a luxury or sideline to real life, but a fundamental dimension of human existence. Our capacity to perceive and create beauty shapes how we design our environments, how we express our values, how we understand ourselves and our place in the world. Different philosophical understandings of beauty influence not just how we think about art, but how we approach nature, technology, everyday objects, and human relationships. You reflect on how these philosophical considerations connect to your own experience of beauty, how you respond to natural landscapes, to works of art, to human faces and forms, to elegant ideas, to well-crafted objects. You notice how aesthetic appreciation permeates your life in ways you might not always consciously recognize, but that fundamentally shape how you perceive and value your world. Modern life, Sophia observes, presents particular challenges for philosophical approaches to beauty. Mass production and commercialization can reduce aesthetic experience to consumption. Digital technologies create new possibilities for both creating and experiencing beauty, while sometimes flattening aesthetic engagement through algorithmically driven homogenization. Environmental degradation threatens natural beauty, while economic inequality limits who has access to beautiful environments. These contemporary realities give new urgency to philosophical questions about beauty's nature and value. These reflections create a slightly melancholic note in your experience of the garden, recognition of beauty's fragility in the modern world, how what has been damaged or lost might not be easily recovered, how access to beauty remains unequally distributed. Yet, there's also a sense of possibility. that deeper philosophical understanding of beauty might help address these challenges, might guide more sustainable and equitable approaches to creating and preserving beauty in human life. As we continue our philosophical journey, Sophia says, notice how this exploration of beauty connects to our earlier questions. Our understanding of reality shapes how we conceive of beauty's ontological status. Our conception of knowledge influences how we approach aesthetic judgment and appreciation. Our perspective on time affects how we understand beauty that unfolds temporally, like music or narrative. Our ethical values inform what kinds of beauty we cultivate and how we make it available. These philosophical threads continue to interweave, each question illuminating the others. The quality of darkness around you in the garden has shifted further toward dawn. While the sun remains below the horizon, a subtle lightening is now perceptible in the eastern sky. The stars overhead are fewer, but still visible in most of the dome of night. Your body maintains its state of deep relaxation, while your mind balances gentle alertness with increasing tranquility. The philosophical journey continues to unfold in a way that engages both intellect and sensibility, conceptual understanding, and aesthetic appreciation. Now, Sophia suggests, let's explore a question that connects naturally to our consideration of beauty and value: the nature of human connection and relationship. What does it mean to truly know another person? What forms of relationship allow for authentic recognition and reciprocity? How do we balance individuality and connection, independence and intimacy? This question takes us into territory where philosophy touches on some of our deepest interpersonal concerns and aspirations. As the garden of beauty gradually dissolves in your imagination, a new landscape begins to take shape, one that invites exploration of friendship, love, community, and the complex dynamics of human connection. Your philosophical journey deepens further as you prepare to consider questions that touch directly on how we relate to each other as fellow travelers through existence, how we build meaningful bonds across the mysterious gap that separates one consciousness from another. Imagine, Sophia begins, that you are standing at the edge of a ravine. Across this apparent divide, you can see other beings, some familiar, some strange, all fundamentally separate from you in their own experience of existence. Between you stretches a series of bridges, some ancient and well-worn, others newly constructed, some broad and sturdy, others delicate and swaying. These are the bridges of human connection, the various ways we reach across the gap that separates one consciousness from another. As Sophia speaks, this landscape materializes around you with remarkable clarity. You can see the ravine of separation, the fundamental fact that each consciousness experiences reality from its own perspective, that no one can directly access another's subjective experience. Yet, you can also see the multiple bridges that span this divide: language and communication, empathy and understanding, love and friendship, shared activities and common purposes, cultural frameworks, and social institutions. This landscape, Sophia continues, represents one of philosophy's most profound questions: the nature of human connection and relationship. How do we bridge the gap between fundamentally separate consciousnesses? What does it mean to truly know another person? What forms of relationship allow for authentic recognition and reciprocity? How do we balance individuality and connection, independence and intimacy? These questions touch on some of our deepest interpersonal concerns and aspirations. As you contemplate these questions, you become aware of their existential weight. The quality of your connections with others fundamentally shapes your experience of life, your sense of meaning and purpose, your understanding of yourself and your world. The philosophical puzzle of how separate beings can truly connect is not merely theoretical, but intimately practical. Ancient philosophical traditions, Sophia explains, often placed friendship at the center of their ethical vision. Aristotle famously distinguished between friendships based on utility, where we value others for their usefulness to us, friendships based on pleasure, where we value others for the enjoyment they bring, and complete friendship based on virtue or excellence, where we value others for their character and goodness. This highest form of friendship, Aristotle suggested, involves recognizing and appreciating the other person for who they truly are, not merely for what they provide. As Sophia describes this Aristotelian typology, the bridges across the ravine take on different qualities, some appearing merely functional, others oriented toward enjoyment, and some embodying that deeper recognition that sees and values the other's essential nature and character. What's particularly beautiful in Aristotle's account, Sophia continues, is his description of the friend as another self, not in the sense of erasing difference, but in the sense that true friendship involves a kind of extension of self-concern to include the other's well-being as intrinsically important to you. The true friend's good is not merely instrumental to your own, but has become part of what you value for its own sake. This creates a powerful bridge across the gap of separate existence. This perspective illuminates one of the sturdiest bridges in your vision, the kind of friendship that transcends mere utility or pleasure to become a genuine valuing of another's existence and flourishing as good in itself, as intrinsically worthy of care and support. Other philosophical traditions, Sophia notes, have emphasized different aspects of human connection. Confucian thought places particular importance on properly ordered familial and social relationships as the foundation for both personal cultivation and societal harmony. The concept of Ren, often translated as humaneness or benevolence, points to the development of genuine concern for others that extends outward from one's closest relationships to encompass wider circles of humanity. The bridges in your vision now reveal this expanding pattern, connections that begin with immediate family and close friends, but gradually extend to include broader communities, eventually reaching toward a universal human connection that respects the dignity and worth of all persons, regardless of proximity or familiarity. Buddhist philosophy, Sophia continues, offers yet another perspective through concepts like metta, loving-kindness, and karuna, compassion. These approaches suggest that genuine connection with others involves recognizing both our fundamental separateness, each being has its own journey and karma, and our profound interconnection. Each being seeks happiness and wishes to avoid suffering just as we do. Practices of metta cultivation deliberately extend care and goodwill from those we naturally love to those we feel neutral toward, those we find difficult, and eventually all beings without exception. This Buddhist perspective transforms your vision of the bridges, suggesting that connection isn't merely about building links between permanently separate entities, but about gradually recognizing a deeper unity that already exists beneath apparent separation, a fundamental kinship among all conscious beings based on shared vulnerability and shared aspiration. Modern philosophy, Sophia explains, has explored the paradoxes and complexities of human connection in new ways. Existentialist thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre highlighted the tension between our need for connection and the threat of objectification. How others' perceptions can turn us from subjects into objects, from beings with our own projects and purposes into mere things in others' worlds. Yet this same tradition also recognizes that we need others' recognition to fully realize our freedom and humanity. This existentialist insight reveals both the peril and promise of the bridges in your vision, how crossing them involves vulnerability, how connection always carries the risk of misrecognition or reduction, yet also offers the possibility of being truly seen and affirmed in your essential freedom and dignity. Feminist philosophers, Sophia adds, have particularly emphasized the ethical and political dimensions of relationship. Carol Gilligan's Ethics of Care suggests that moral development involves not just applying abstract principles, but becoming more attuned and responsive to others' needs within concrete relationships. Nell Noddings distinguishes between natural caring that arises spontaneously in close relationships and ethical caring that extends this attentiveness beyond our immediate circles. These approaches highlight how genuine connection requires not just conceptual understanding, but emotional responsiveness and practical care. These feminist perspectives add new dimensions to the bridges in your vision, revealing how connection isn't merely cognitive or affective, but involves practices of attention, responsiveness, and care that create and sustain relationship over time through concrete acts of support and recognition. Contemporary philosophy, Sophia observes, continues to wrestle with both the possibilities and limitations of human connection in an increasingly networked yet often alienated world. Digital technologies create new forms of connection that transcend physical distance, but may lack the embodied presence and full sensory engagement of face-to-face interaction. Global awareness expands our circles of moral concern, while sometimes overwhelming our capacity for meaningful response. Economic and social systems alternately facilitate and obstruct authentic human relationship. These reflections cast the bridges in your vision in a more complex light, revealing both new possibilities for connection across traditional boundaries and new challenges to sustained, meaningful relationship in contemporary contexts of technological mediation, geographic mobility, and systemic pressures toward instrumentalization. What's particularly fascinating, Sophia suggests, is how philosophical explorations of connection relate to questions of personal identity. If who we are is significantly shaped by our relationships, as many philosophers across traditions have argued, then genuine connection with others isn't merely something that happens between fully formed individuals. Rather, our connections actually participate in creating who we are. We become ourselves through and with others, not prior to our relationships. This perspective transforms your understanding of the bridges, suggesting that they don't merely connect pre-existing separate entities, but actually participate in constituting who those entities are. That selfhood and relationship aren't successive, but simultaneous, each continuously shaping and being shaped by the other. This relational understanding of identity, Sophia continues, appears in various philosophical traditions. African Ubuntu philosophy expresses it in the phrase, "I am because we are," recognizing how personhood emerges through community rather than preceding it. Martin Buber's distinction between I-it and I-thou relationships suggests that genuine dialogue doesn't just connect pre-existing subjects, but actually brings a different quality of selfhood into being. Contemporary care ethics emphasizes how we are always already in relationships of interdependence, never the fully autonomous individuals of some liberal political theories. These diverse philosophical approaches deepen your vision of the bridges, revealing them not as mere connections between independently existing beings, but as constitutive elements of those beings themselves, as essential rather than optional aspects of human existence and identity. What makes these philosophical questions about connection more than abstract puzzles, Sophia observes, is their profound practical significance. The quality of our relationships fundamentally shapes our well-being, our sense of meaning, our psychological and physical health. Research across disciplines confirms what philosophical traditions have long recognized. Genuine connection is not a luxury, but a necessity for human flourishing. Yet, authentic connection requires navigating complex tensions between closeness and independence, vulnerability and self-protection, familiarity and difference. You reflect on how these philosophical considerations connect to your own experience of relationship, how your connections with others have shaped who you are, how different forms of relationship have enriched or constrained your life, how you've navigated the continuing challenges of bridging the gap between separate consciousnesses while maintaining appropriate boundaries and respecting difference. As we continue our philosophical journey, Sophia says, notice how this exploration of connection relates to our earlier questions. Our understanding of consciousness shapes how we conceive the gap between minds. Our conception of identity influences how we understand the relationship between self and other. Our perspective on ethics informs what kinds of connection we consider virtuous or vicious. Our aesthetic sensibilities affect how we perceive and appreciate others across difference. These philosophical threads continue to interweave, each question illuminating the others. The quality of darkness around you in the garden has shifted decisively toward dawn. While the sun itself remains below the horizon, a distinct glow is now visible in the eastern sky. The brightest stars remain visible overhead, but many have faded as the approaching day gradually asserts itself. Your body maintains its state of deep relaxation, while your mind balances gentle alertness with increasing tranquility. The philosophical journey continues to unfold in a way that engages both abstract understanding and lived experience, conceptual clarity, and emotional resonance. We have now, Sophia observes, explored many of the fundamental philosophical questions that have occupied human thought throughout history and continue to challenge us today. We've considered the nature of reality and how we know it, the puzzles of identity and consciousness, the mysteries of freedom and determination, the foundations of value and meaning, the enigmas of time and beauty, and the complexities of human connection. As we prepare to conclude our journey, let's reflect on what unifies these diverse philosophical explorations and what they might collectively suggest about the human condition and our place in the cosmos. As the ravine and bridges of connection gradually dissolve in your imagination, a new landscape begins to take shape, one that invites integration and synthesis of the various philosophical territories you've traversed throughout this journey. The philosophical exploration reaches toward completion not through final answers to these enduring questions, but through a deeper appreciation of their interconnection and their continuing significance for human understanding. Imagine, Sophia begins, that you have now arrived at a circular clearing in the midst of a vast philosophical forest. The various paths you've traveled throughout our journey, the cave of perception, the river of identity, the theater of consciousness, the labyrinth of freedom, the Garden of Values, the Mountain of Meaning, the Tower of Knowledge, the River of Time, the Garden of Beauty, and the Bridge of Connection all converge in this central space. Here, in this clearing of integration, the separate threads of philosophical inquiry reveal themselves as parts of a single tapestry of human wondering. As Sophia speaks, this clearing materializes around you with gentle clarity. The pre-dawn light now provides sufficient illumination to see the various paths that have led you here, each representing a distinct philosophical territory you've explored. Yet from this vantage point, you can perceive connections between these territories that weren't visible when you were immersed in each one separately. A comprehensive vision begins to emerge, not of final answers, but of the profound interrelatedness of philosophical questions. This clearing, Sophia continues, represents a space of philosophical synthesis, where we recognize that while we've explored different questions as distinct inquiries, they form an interconnected whole. Our understanding of reality shapes our conception of knowledge. Our approach to identity influences our perspective on freedom. Our ethical values inform our sense of meaning. Our aesthetic sensibilities affect how we perceive and connect with others. Philosophy isn't merely a collection of separate puzzles, but a holistic engagement with the fundamental mysteries of existence. As you contemplate this integration, you notice how each philosophical question illuminates the others. The puzzle of personal identity looks different when considered in light of questions about time's nature. The mystery of consciousness takes on new dimensions when connected to inquiries about reality's fundamental character. The question of freedom gains depth when related to explorations of meaning and purpose. The philosophical territories aren't isolated islands, but interconnected provinces in a single realm of wonder. What's particularly beautiful, Sophia observes, is that this integration doesn't reduce philosophical questioning to a single master problem or approach. Rather, it reveals a rich ecology of inquiry, where different questions and methods complement and challenge each other. Some philosophical mysteries might be best approached through logical analysis, others through phenomenological description, still others through pragmatic consideration of consequences. This plurality of approaches reflects the multifaceted nature of human experience itself. This perspective creates a deepened appreciation of philosophical diversity, not as competing positions where only one can be correct, but as complementary insights that capture different aspects of reality and experience, different facets of the inexhaustible mystery of existence. The clearing doesn't eliminate philosophical differences, but reveals them as productive tensions within a larger conversation. Throughout our journey, Sophia continues, we've encountered philosophical approaches from various traditions and time periods, from ancient Greece to classical India and China, from medieval Islamic and Christian thought to modern European philosophy, from indigenous wisdom traditions to contemporary global discourse. Each brings distinctive perspectives and conceptual resources to these enduring questions. Their differences aren't merely cultural accidents, but reflect genuine plurality in how human understanding can approach the fundamental mysteries of existence. The clearing around you seems to expand as Sophia speaks, making space for this philosophical diversity. You can see how different cultural and historical contexts have generated distinctive approaches to similar questions, each offering valuable insights that might not be available through other frameworks. This plurality appears not as a problem to be overcome, but as a resource to be appreciated and engaged. At the same time, Sophia notes, certain themes and insights recur across different traditions and time periods. Many philosophical approaches recognize the limitations of purely conceptual thought for grasping reality's deepest nature. Many emphasize how self-understanding requires engaging with what lies beyond the self. Many acknowledge tension between our aspiration for certainty and the inherent limitations of human knowing. Many suggest that genuine wisdom involves not just accumulating information, but transforming how we perceive and relate to existence. These commonalities create a sense of philosophical kinship across differences, suggesting not a single universal philosophy, but recurring human insights that emerge across diverse contexts, perhaps reflecting something fundamental about the human condition and its relationship to reality. What unifies philosophical inquiry across these differences, Sophia suggests, is its distinctive combination of intellectual rigor and existential significance. Philosophy demands disciplined thinking, careful distinction-making, logical consistency, conceptual clarity, attentiveness to evidence. Yet it applies this rigor to questions that matter deeply for how we understand ourselves and our place in the cosmos. It's neither abstract puzzle solving detached from lived concerns, nor mere expression of personal opinion untested by critical examination. This integration of intellectual discipline and existential relevance gives philosophy its distinctive character in your vision of the clearing, neither purely theoretical nor merely practical, but operating at the intersection where clear thinking meets fundamental human concerns, where conceptual understanding touches the mystery of being alive. Particularly fascinating, Sophia observes, is how philosophical inquiry relates to other forms of human understanding. Philosophy engages in critical dialogue with religious and spiritual traditions, with scientific investigation, with artistic creation, with practical wisdom, with political and social thought. It neither subordinates itself to these other approaches nor attempts to replace them. Rather, it offers a distinctive kind of reflection that complements and sometimes challenges other ways of making sense of existence. The clearing in your vision expands further to make space for these diverse forms of understanding, each with its own validity and value, each offering distinctive insights, each with its own appropriate methods and standards, yet all engaged in the larger human project of making sense of experience and finding orientation within existence. This relationship between philosophy and other forms of understanding, Sophia continues, highlights another recurring theme in our journey: the balance between rationality and mystery, between what can be clearly comprehended and what exceeds or challenges conceptual understanding. Throughout history, many philosophers have recognized both the power of rational inquiry and its limitations, suggesting that wisdom involves not just extending knowledge, but recognizing its boundaries, not just answering questions, but appreciating the depth of questioning itself. This balance creates a unique quality in the clearing of your vision, a space where clarity and mystery aren't opposed but complementary, where precision of thought coexists with openness to what transcends full conceptualization, where philosophical progress consists not just in finding answers, but in developing more insightful and productive ways of engaging with enduring questions. What makes these philosophical integrations more than academic exercises, Sophia suggests, is their potential to transform how we understand and live our lives. Philosophy at its best isn't merely about contemplating abstract puzzles, but about seeing everyday experience with fresh eyes, recognizing the extraordinary within the ordinary, appreciating the depth and complexity of what we typically take for granted. The philosophical journey doesn't remove us from life, but returns us to it with enhanced vision and understanding. You reflect on how engaging with these philosophical questions might transform your own relationship to everyday experience, how awareness of perception's constructed nature might change how you perceive, how recognition of self's fluidity might shift how you understand identity, how consideration of time's puzzles might alter how you experience past and future, how reflection on connection's complexities might deepen your relationships. In this sense, Sophia observes, philosophical questioning isn't something separate from or added onto life, but is latent within human experience itself. Children naturally ask philosophical questions before they know philosophy exists. Adults find themselves wondering about meaning, reality, knowledge, and value, even without formal philosophical training. The philosophical journey doesn't create wonder from nothing, but cultivates and disciplines what already exists in ordinary human engagement with existence. This perspective reveals philosophy not as an esoteric specialization, but as the deliberate cultivation of a distinctively human capacity for reflective wondering, for stepping back from immediate experience to question its nature and significance, for seeking understanding beyond the merely practical or conventional. As our journey comes to its conclusion, Sophia says, I invite you to carry these philosophical questions with you into your everyday life, not as burdens of uncertainty, but as openings into wonder, not as puzzles that must be definitively solved, but as invitations to deeper engagement with the mystery of existence, not as abstract speculations detached from practical concerns, but as resources for living more reflectively, more appreciatively, more attentively. The clearing around you seems to pulse gently with this invitation, suggesting that the philosophical journey doesn't end when this specific exploration concludes, but continues throughout life. Whenever you pause to question, to wonder, to seek understanding beyond the immediately given or conventionally accepted. Remember, Sophia suggests, that philosophical questioning isn't limited to formal arguments or technical vocabulary. It happens whenever you ask about the nature or significance of experience, whenever you examine assumptions rather than merely acting on them, whenever you seek to understand something in its deeper context rather than its surface appearance. Philosophy, in this sense, belongs not just to academic specialists, but to anyone who wonders about the mystery of being alive and conscious in this astonishing cosmos. This democratic vision of philosophy creates a sense of invitation and accessibility in the clearing, suggesting that these ancient questions remain available to anyone willing to engage them sincerely. That philosophical wonder isn't a specialized aptitude, but a general human capacity that can be cultivated and developed throughout life. What I hope you take from our journey, Sophia says with gentle warmth, is not a set of definitive answers to these ancient questions, but an enhanced appreciation for their depth and significance. Not certainty about reality's ultimate nature, but greater attentiveness to the extraordinary within ordinary experience. Not final resolution of philosophical puzzles, but more resourceful ways of engaging with uncertainty and mystery. Not dogmatic positions on contested issues, but expanded capacity to consider multiple perspectives and their partial truths. As Sophia speaks, you notice that dawn has definitively arrived. The first direct rays of sunlight have appeared on the eastern horizon, illuminating the clearing with golden light. Yet rather than banishing mystery, This illumination seems to reveal even more clearly the inexhaustible depth and complexity of existence, the endlessly renewed invitation to philosophical wonder. Our exploration of these ancient questions that still baffle us today, Sophia concludes, hasn't reached definitive endpoints or absolute certainties. Yet perhaps it has revealed something equally valuable, that philosophical questioning itself is an essential aspect of human flourishing, that engagement with mystery and uncertainty can enrich rather than impoverish life, that the journey of understanding matters as much as any destination it might reach. In embracing philosophical wonder, we don't abandon the quest for knowledge, but expand it beyond mere information to include wisdom, a more comprehensive, more humble, more engaged relationship with the enduring mysteries of existence. As Sophia's final words resonate through the clearing, you find yourself in a state of profound receptivity, body completely relaxed, mind clear yet tranquil, consciousness expanded yet focused.